We would, and we would love to invite Gray to
Oh, it'd
way
be
more
great
parties.
to have Gray at a party.
I'd love to have Gray at every opportunity that we could have groups of people. Love to have Gray there every single time. You just, I'm all right.
When we have the monthly like birthday parties and office functions at where I work, I'd stay at my desk.
You're a man. You're around. That'd be like if my sister-in-law had a party at the house while we were like recording a podcast or something, and then we took a break to go eat cake, and you're like, I'll stay in front of my mic, thank you. What a dick.
Everybody's there in the conference room. It's crowded. I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to go grab some of the food. And I'm going to go back to my desk.
Welcome to Take the Damage podcast by Unfortunate Ones. I'm Sav,
I'm Nix.
I'm Graythorn.
and we are going to roll for our topic for today. 17.
17 is linear and nonlinear storytelling.
Oh, okay. That's kind of interesting. So, I mean, I have that going on right now, and I can immediately say I much prefer nonlinear.
Yeah.
I have a campaign going that I wrote to be like an epic type thing, like a real like Lord of the Rings thing, right? And what I'm finding is it's really common for players to have experienced and want to experience again ultimate freedom. And ultimate freedom very commonly means straying away from what you're doing. And obviously I could outthink and, pave the way back to the main story or whatever, or let them sidetrack for a bit. But it's so much work keeping things back in line. I've never played a pre-written adventure module. My understanding is that they have all types of side shit that are going on that you could interact with, or like Curse of Strahd, I think it just places you in a place where you can't leave. So you could do as much side shit as you want, but the campaign's always there.
I believe it
you.
funnels you back into the...
Yeah, I just don't like doing the funneling part. I much prefer being like, here's a world, here's a task, figure it out, because that's enough of a hook to want to keep people on task because they could go about it any way they want to go about it.
I think naturally, players progress in that way. Players just want to do like a nonlinear story where it's just kind of like open world and like here's these different things. And you can have like linear sections.
Oh, absolutely.
Where like the open world unlocks this linear story. And then if your players are invested enough, they go down that path. So like, I think there are ways to kind of play with both. But I think generally, from my experience, most people prefer like an open story, like an open world and like nonlinear storytelling where like, but
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that's my preferred way to do it, is to like just shove you in a tavern somewhere, give you an adventure hook for a campaign, like a full campaign. Like for our G&G campaign, it was like, hey, you're in Colorado. Here is why you're here. This is the overall task. You don't have any supplies or money. What are you doing next? And I think it takes a while to grasp it and to figure out what your path is. And then it's really easy to funnel because anywhere someone goes, you could just leave breadcrumbs or hints and clues and whatnot.
Yeah.
But also the need to funnel is significantly less, and people have fun exploring and really get to do whatever. There's less of that. I think every player has a responsibility to the game, and it gets overlooked a lot. Everybody knows the GM has responsibility to the game, but it doesn't get talked about a lot. Players have a responsibility to the game, and that responsibility is to play the game, play the campaign as it is being put upon you. That is the story that your GM has written for you. And players that enjoy that more open world aspect in a more linear campaign and don't understand that sense of responsibility make it a little more difficult to reel them back in or funnel them back in. Whereas if you write it to be an open world game where the task exists, but go about it however you want to go about it, people seem to stay on track a lot more. People seem, because you're allowing them to do it the way they want to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I think doing it the open world way is like, it's a much fucking longer campaign though. I think one shots and mini campaigns are perfectly fine to be linear though.
Yeah.
That's like the ideal time to make a linear story, because it's supposed to be short, usually directed. There is going to be like a hard set, like, hey, you're all this and this and this, and you're gonna go find this and this and that. So you kind of want that linearity. But,
it's also just much easier to give the adventure hook of like, and people understand it because you have such a short amount of time. It's like, hey, you are a soldier for the King's Guard, and this is you were sent here for this reason. And it's so much easier to attach yourself to that and then play the story. Whereas like if you're playing a whole ass campaign, people want to write their own backstories and they want to be who they are and they want their own reasons for being there, and then they're irresponsible and they don't line up and they don't want to play the game. Well, they don't want to play what you have written, and they want to do whatever they want, which is fine. And also just fuck around campaigns with no motivations are fine.
Yeah.
You're just in this world.
I was gonna ask Gray what your general take was on the topic.
Yeah.
it's all a matter of use case, I think. Like,
How do you run your current game?
oh, it's there is no real story. If my players want to go do something else on the other side of the continent, they're free to do that.
Well, beyond being free to do that, though, is there an overarching story that they are attached to, or do they just exist in your world as a party?
So it's kind of difficult with my players because there's a lot of ambiguity in both character creation and motive, and there's kind of a lot of writing that I kind of have to do for, I want to say 3 out of 4 of them in my current campaign. So like one guy is just, oh, I'm a researcher for this person whom is my master, and I'm gonna go do a job for them. That's like their story. It's like I'm just gonna go find random potions and weird shit to test. That's his story. That's what he wants to do. And he's the kind of player that doesn't need a story to follow. He just needs events to happen, and he'll do them.
Yeah.
Like he's the perfect player.
Yeah, a player that's willing to write characters that could be attached to any story is really, really nice.
Yes. And then like for the other 3, one of them has like no real goals at all. They're kind of just there because I guess they like the game.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then there's other 2 who they didn't really write too much of a backstory for themselves, and I kind of did a lot of the heavy lifting on their backstory with them. Like one of them is like, oh, I want to learn magic, so I'm gonna be magic guy. Like, all right, your master wants you to find something, and because your warlock patron likes magical items and wants to learn about them, so you got to go find this cursed thing. And the other person's like, oh, my father was killed, my brother was injured, and I want to find who did it. I'm like, who did it? I gotta think all that up. So
That doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the heavy lifting that I do. So I wrote a lot more for his family than he wrote for him, than he wrote and gave to me.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. And so the story is, hey, you guys were given one of you met a guy who asked you, hey, here's 50 gold, go escort this person to this other city. And then the other person also kind of got that same mission. It's like, hey, I need you for the sake of our family to escort this person to this other city. And that's all the story that they were given. And from there on, whether they choose to follow the whole escorting the person to the city and then following up on who tried to kill them because that person died session 1, it's all up to them. And I let them take the reins of the roller coaster.
Yeah.
And make their own rails.
That's not linear at all.
There's
so there's
no
not even an
linearity.
overarching story.
There is an overarching story because it happens as it processes. Like now, after that person died and what they did to that person, it's like, okay, so now I'm building an entire thing for this.
Well, that's that's more of an overarching world if they don't have to interact with it.
To in a way, do you?
Right.
That's, I guess, how I look.
Yeah.
That's how I look at non-linear stories. I make a world.
Yeah.
Do
So it's
you
kinda hard
like
for me to do that.
like you have your players have that nonlinear interaction, and then depending on what they do, you try to fold that back into your like the overall linear story that you're trying to tell? Is that kind of what you're trying to do?
That's a good question.
I don't think so, because like in our previous campaign, there was no story at all that they really had to do.
Yeah.
There was just, you guys are here in this place. This is what this place is like. What are you guys up to? And as they travel, I throw some things at them. They take one of the hooks. They follow that hook. There is an overarching story in this area here. They could follow it, and they follow it for the most part. And like 30% of the way, something else catches their attention.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So I feel like we got like three types of stories. One would be like a super linear story where like this is what you're doing, almost like a one shot, but doing
Like
it
a
across
one shot or like an adventure
but
module.
doing
or-
it across a campaign. And then we have the polar opposite of that being your thing, which is more like less of an overarching story and more of a world.
like a world
Yeah.
that
And the
players
world
are
is
interacting
moving.
with.
And
there's
like,
a world, and if they want to choose to be on one of the carts, they could be on that cart. And
Exactly.
Ride that story to its end.
Or they could fuck off,
Or
burn
they
the
could
cart
leave.
to the ground, steal a horse,
They've-
run out into the woods, and find a hag, and
they've-
that could be the arc.
They've burnt carts to the ground.
Yep.
They've
So
destroyed
it's
carts.
Polar opposite, just
One of
existing
them-
within a world.
Suicide bombed a cart.
Yeah.
Let's it happens. It goes.
And then there's the third one, at least that I've seen so far in this conversation, which would be the more middle ground one, which is like there is a story. You are a part of that story. You are doing that story. It's been integrated, if not, it is your background. But how you go about it is however you want to go about it. You are in a tavern in the capital. You need to, assassinate this nobleman. Go.
and
And like however you want to go about doing it, whatever side arcs you want to go on, fine. It's not railroady at all. You're not being pushed in a direction. You just got to figure it out at whatever pace you want to figure it out. So it's kind of middle ground. It is a pre-written story, so to speak, that you are interacting with. You have complete freedom on how to go about it.
yeah, and it could be too like a modification, or like maybe it is that same example you were giving, where like it's you could have them be doing stuff,
Yeah.
and then like whatever they do, you do like integrate it into the linear story that you are wanting to tell. Like yes, there is a little bit of like the world reacts to the players, but it also could be like you kind of lean it a little bit towards. So like your players have a little bit more, like the world is responding a little bit more to your players than it potentially logically would, but it's helping kind of like
To pull
drive-
it back in.
Yeah, to pull them back in, or to like to give them to.
Well, I think that's how linear stories run, is doing that. It is the funneling back. It is you could do a side even in more linear stories, you could do the side
Yeah.
quests and it gets folded back into the main story, where this is more like you almost have a more general story with a more general task to do, and then however you go about it is however you go about it.
Yeah. It's also like kind of like a little bit of what I said earlier, where you can have like the open kind of funnels into linear, and you can also have like linear funnel into open,
Sure.
or like a non-linear, like the campaign I ran for you guys, which was it was a one shot, it was a very linear story. It was a very you guys are.
It was
gonna
a one
be-
shot, yeah.
You guys are going to be here. You're going to do this thing. There's not really like there's stuff to interact with, but there wasn't a world that I built. It was the locations I built, and
Yeah.
like the interactions between those locations. There wasn't really anything outside of that. It was a fucking fog wall that
Yeah.
and then you guys played that and were like, hey, we want to keep doing this, and it was like, well, now that you guys want to keep doing this, guess what? I gotta whip up the world. The
Yeah.
world has to be then built around what you guys are doing, and then for me at least, it was chasing that dragon of like building the world as you guys are interacting with it.
Yeah.
And so like it became a little bit overwhelming at a certain point, but it was still like going from that very linearized, here's a one shot, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we want to keep doing this, and then your guys' actions led it to like, now it's totally fucking open world, and it's like, yeah, I guess you get, what do you guys want to do?
Yeah. So, I think you could do the linear thing, and where you fold in the side quests and things lead back to the main story. I think you could best achieve that when you have very responsible players. You know your players and you know they're responsible. Like we could do it at our home table. We'd be able to do that for sure. I can think of a couple of my other tables that would be more than willing to do that. But I can think of a couple other tables that I have that it wouldn't go well. It wouldn't go well because they don't want to do that. You know what I mean? They do want to go off and fuck off and do something else. And it would almost be a negative thing if that folded somehow back into the overall arc. Like they just want to, like more like Gray's world. They just want to exist within the world and do whatever they want, and slowly achieve things.
I think there are ways that you can pull people back in without like necessarily needing like those kind of players who are like, okay, yeah, the DM set this here, like let's play. Like, let's play with the story that DM wants, like...
I have players that I think would be deterred by me bringing them back to... I think they would, after doing it 2 or 3 times, I think they would be like, oh, man, again? No, I don't want to be doing this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can see
it's
that.
Like, yeah, I think there are players that just aren't into linear stories. Just like
Sure.
I have a preference on how linear or open the story would be. Players do as well. And so, like, I think... really responsible players that are willing to be attached to a story. I think if you had that, you could tell a linear story really well.
Yeah. I mean, like, I have a couple of ideas that I've written down. I haven't run it to anybody, but, like, I do have a couple ideas. But it's more of what you said earlier and what Gray said earlier, which is, again, one shot in mini campaigns. Like, at least one of the stories wouldn't be a mini campaign. It would be a pretty long campaign, but it would still be... Generally, there is a start, there's the kickoff, and there's an end goal that your players need to achieve.
Yeah.
And then, to me, that is somewhat linear in that, like...
Well, it's not linear, it's just there is a story.
There is a story, but it's also, like, it's linear in
linear
that,
would be, like, you have to hit steps along the way to get to that thing.
Yeah, but in my mind, one of the stories I have, it would be something like that. Like,
oh, okay.
In order to achieve
then,
the
yeah,
final
that's a little
goal,
more linear.
there would be, like, little things that the players would have to do to get there.
Yeah.
And it's like, you do have to definitely have players who are going to be responding in the way that's like, okay, I recognize the DM wants to play this story. Let's play in the space. It's kind of like the example that always comes into my head about this kind of storytelling or this kind of version of D&D is kind of like Critical Role. Like Critical Role, those players, yeah, they are chaotic sometimes, and yeah, they kind of just do things, but they also, I think they do recognize when Matt is like trying to tell them a story and trying to lead them down a path, trying to be
be responsible about it.
Here's a thing to interact with. I don't think I've ever seen anything where like he has like put something on the table and the character's like, I'm all right.
We're doing something else.
We're gonna go do something else.
I've experienced that a lot. We've done that to you.
Yeah, of course.
But like, so if you have people that do that, and it's not a bad thing to do that. It's just know your players to a degree, and talk to your players and see what they want, and that's important.
Yeah. And I think it's important for especially if you're like a newer DM or if you're going to try to DM for your friends or for people, it's definitely something to recognize, especially with like the modern media version of D&D that people see for the most part is like players who usually are those responsible players, the players who want to play in the same space with each other. And so they don't just ignore their DM. They don't just do another thing. Granted, that's in the zeitgeist. If you're in the D&D space and the TTRPG space, the zeitgeist is, the DM wrote a page of a story, and then your players start playing, and all of a sudden you have to tear up your papers. Like, that's the zeitgeist of, like, playing.
Yeah.
So, like, it just... Hey, a lot of people just like to...
I mean, that happens way more in more open play like Gray's World, where it's like
My very first session.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I was thinking in my head of an analogy of like what a linear campaign would be. Is you imagine you walk your player party to a shore, and on the other side of the shore is the end of the campaign, and there are very specific stones across the water that you need to jump on to get to the other side. And like you could do other things and grab sticks and make little bridges and whatnot. Obviously, there is still freedom of choice, but you have to funnel them back to those stones in order for them to get across. And then what my middle ground one is more like you take them to a river. There's the goal is on the other end of the river, but you don't take them to the stones. And then, they have to figure out, do they go back to town and get a bunch of money and start a whole guild so that they could have enough money to build a stone bridge across? Do they want to bother with that? Do they find a dwarven lumberjack to cut down trees and make a raft? Do they find the stones? You get across however the fuck you want. And then the open world Gray version of it is you just don't take them to that river. or you take them to the river and then they decide we don't care about this river and they go somewhere else.
Yeah, that as you take them to the river,
exactly.
it's like, hey, the goal's over there, and then your players go, I want to go back over there though.
Yeah, I like the tavern we left more.
I want to go back to the tavern. It's because I can think of, so there's, again, I think a lot of like very linearized stories, even if that's a word. A lot of those stories are like, for the most part, I think most people's interaction with that is like adventure story or like adventure modules or like adventure, like pre-written stuff. Because the one I can think of in my head is there's a guy named Mr. Rex. He's like a YouTuber or whatever. And he came out with like a adventure module for adventures between levels 3 and 15 or whatever, something like that. And it's a whole story of like, there's this event happening and you have to like, it culminates with this big battle against the god, I think. And like part of the journey is you have to hit these bullet points. You don't have to, but there are like generals that you deal with. It as you deal with the generals, it makes the boss hard or easier.
Yeah.
So like it's kind of like a video game where like the video game has it where like
that's kind of how G&G was.
Yeah.
There's no demigod fight at the end, but G&G was like, there's a bunch of leaders spread across Colorado. You're here to wipe them out. G&G was also more like general extermination of the rival gang.
At least your story.
Mine was. Yeah, sorry.
Your story in
I should emphasize that
G&G.
G&G is the system. We just called our campaign
your campaign
after
in
the
that
system.
world. Did you have like a rough name for that?
I don't know. Tommy Reed gang?
All right.
No, we didn't.
I was just asking.
Yeah, I know. We never named our campaign, which is funny.
The one I ran with you guys, it had no name for the longest time until I had to make a campaign.
I don't think until it was the last chapter of the campaign that we named the campaign.
Yeah,
the one that you did. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I named it like Lord's Fall or something like that.
That
Uh,
was it.
I really do enjoy soft hooks, and I enjoy particularly that is one of my favorite arcs or not arcs, but story hooks to tell is like, hey, here's a bad guy. Here are his main underlings, the upper leadership of this main bad guy's stuff. Go kill them. It's such a soft hook, and it allows people to like. There's so many ways to do that, and one of my campaigns is that I'm currently running is that as well, which is there are 6. What do I call them? 6 masters. Each of those are in pairs, and they fall under 3 wardens. And then above that is the I forget what I called her, but the leader of the guild that they are going against. And basically, it's like, you got to bring all 10 of them to justice in some manner. Anyways, you're in this small little hamlet in the middle of this world. I created the entire world. I like doing that because it makes it also really fun and almost easy to GM because it's very reactionary and improv, and I enjoy that, and I think I'm pretty decent at it. And then also it allows me to just logic the world because I don't need to funnel them in any direction. They're trying to figure out how to get to this thing. So just, yeah, I mean, does what they're doing logically make sense? Can I give them hints and clues? Cool. No? Well, then they run into a dead end here.
Mm-hmm.
Too bad. Move on. I got another campaign going right now with an even softer hook, which is like, you've traveled to this new land. You know nothing about this land. It's an entire realm. You know nothing about it, and you have no way of getting back home. Your goals in the campaign are basically like you're part of a guild, and you need to basically start an enclave of the guild in this world somewhere. So you need to explore where best to place it, figure out how to start a guild, and then find some way to magically link back up with the old realm. And I mean, presumably you got to find someone with teleportation at that point who can make a teleportation circle. But that's such a soft hook. Literally, it's just like, welcome to this new realm. You guys start a guild. Anyways, you're hungry. What are you doing?
Would flaccid hooks, would that be bad? Is that a bad way to
I do enjoy me a good flaccid hook.
I don't want no hard hook, no bricked up hook. I want a fucking flaccid soft hook.
I really want to tell linear stories. I think I need to be in a place where I can have more responsible players.
But I think it's
do so.
I think we have made the joke before, where like, I think it's fine to write linear stories, to want to play in a linear story in a linear space, but also to a degree, depending on how much you're sticking to that linear storytelling. The joke we've made before is write a fucking book.
Oh, it's not even our joke. Yeah.
But
So when I say a linear story, I should say like. Imagine like like a family tree or whatever.
Yeah.
Being your choices tree. And then the other side of that, it should be like two inverted family trees meeting each other, where it's like, hey, there's one ending that you guys are going for. There's these story points along the way. But when you get to this story point, what you do, how you do it, has to change the story in some type of way. Like the players need to be significant.
Yeah.
Period. So like the linear story I'm trying to tell right now is literally the stepping stones are just like this stone where this important thing that is happening. Essentially there's an adventure hook that takes you to this place. What you do in this place, totally up to you.
Yeah.
How you get there, totally up to you.
Yeah.
And then once you're there, your goals will happen, and also the next adventure hook to get to the second place will happen. And then both of those things need to happen before you can get to the last location. So there's really only 3 points in the tail. So it should be pretty easy to funnel people there. And then as long as you can preconceive potential outcomes, multiple potential outcomes of what your players might do there, which is much easier if you know your players and if they care about your campaign, then you could funnel them back in from all of those different points on how to, what they did is important and changes things and changes the story. And then how do you funnel that into the adventure hook for the next step of the story? I don't think there's anything wrong with linear stuff. Linear, I think our use of the word linear is maybe there's such a connotation behind linear.
Of course, yeah.
And like, yes, if it was linear, it's more like stepping stones, a stepping stone story.
That sounds dumb.
It sounds stupid as fuck, but it's more aptly named than linear. Because if it is just a line, and it's like, because I've heard of that. I've had players tell me that where they've played stories like that, where they're like, they make a decision and the DM's like, no, actually you can't do that. And they're like, what do you mean we can't do that? And we're like, well, that NPC needs to be alive for the next part of the story. And it's like, write a book. Yeah. Like characters need to have freedom, and their decisions need to matter. Always. That always needs to be a thing. But that doesn't mean you can't tell a more linear story like the Lord of the Rings or whatever, where like, yeah, it is this journey and these different parts of the story need to happen before the next part of the story can happen. I mean, unless your players find a way to somehow navigate that, but either way, getting them to that point is generally nonlinear. So like you have point A to point B, but there's also, bullet points and Roman numerals of all of the different things that happen based on their choices between those sections. And it should change what point B looks like.
Yeah.
And what they do at point B should change what the next journey and the next point C looks like as well. But you're still trying to get them to those points. Whereas like I write stories that have a general ending or goal, and I do kind of require my players to some degree give a shit about that. But it's literally A and Z are the only things marked on the map, and you can get to Z however the fuck you want. It really, really, really doesn't matter. You got to get from point A to point, Roman numeral 5. And however you get there, doesn't matter. And then there's open world, where there is no alphabet. You start at point A, go.
You find something interesting and then you ruin a bunch of people's lives and you just want to say, hey, yeah, I could go do that something else over there. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah, totally cool.
Yeah.
Well, so my soft hooked you got to start a guild thing. Yeah, they do that all the time. And it doesn't matter to me because in my mind, until they decide to start spreading their, spreading out and finding where they want to place that guild, they could do whatever they want. They're supposed to be. They're supposed to be exploring. They just left a city and they're going to another city. And for all I know, that's responsible play because this next city might be where they want to start their guild.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like anything they're doing, any side quest they do, anything brings them closer to their goal because they're exploring, which is why I like soft hooks so much. I don't have to funnel them at all. I don't have to do any corralling or shepherding or funneling, and they're heading towards their goal. And I much prefer that than linear. I think I also prefer that over complete open world, but I think open world would be fun. I've never ran it, and on Start Playing Games, it just doesn't sell. I've tried to run it, where I'm just like, hey, be in a world, and nobody's interested.
I mean, you know what? You know what is a good idea right now, though? If we cut to one of our sponsor reads.
Oh.
Yeah.
Should we roll on the loot table?
We could roll on the loot table.
We could do that.
Yeah.
It's a good little pause and point.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Come on, everybody. Let's get hyped.
Let's go and roll
Yeah.
on the loot table. Let's go and see
Let's
who
do it,
our
everybody.
sponsors will be.
Come on. Let's go.
Let's go roll on the loot table.
All right. Let's see. It's a 4. Which of our sponsors on the loot table is a 4?
I believe that's Dungeon Trim.
Yes. Introducing our sponsor, Dungeon Trim, the grooming adventure service crafted for adventurers who dare to venture into the deepest dungeons. Unleash your inner hero with our precision engineering tools designed to tame even the wildest of wilderness. From the rugged terrain of the barbarian lands to the intricate mazes of the elven forests, Dungeon Trim ensures you're always ready for your next quest. So, whether you're facing down a dragon or charming a princess, step into the fray with confidence, knowing that you're groomed for glory. Level up your grooming routine and conquer the quest for unrivaled confidence with Dungeon Trim today.
What a great sponsor.
That's a good sponsor. So I will say, I've actually been using it for.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, for like 6 months, and you know what?
Wait. What are you going for? Are you going for like the intricate elvish mazes?
No, I'm going from like elvish woods, and then I'm trying to get into like short grasslands, you know.
Oh, okay,
It's like
okay.
a bit of real trim.
Okay.
But I will say, you know, no abrasions, no bumps, no
Oh, that's
cuts.
good.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, yeah.
it really works. It's the best device I've used in my lifetime, and I will never leave this dungeon.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's as long as we're still in the read, it's the best product. It'll actually grow your 401k. That's something that it's on the ad read. It's perfect. Your net
I don't know
worth,
how they do it.
then your net worth will go up as soon as you use our code.
Well, also, I believe it's enchanted as well, because I've noticed that there's a setting on there where, have you ever been using mundane off-the-shelf trimmers
Yeah.
and chopped a little bit too much off, and you're like, well, that's a little shorter than I wanted to go. Well, there's a
Oh,
setting where
great
it'll
feature.
actually grow it back.
That's a
so you
great
can actually
feature.
use
Yeah,
these
yeah.
trimmers to lengthen your hair.
And the best thing is that they don't make their blades out of Electrum.
Dude,
Well, Electrum doesn't exist. Electrum's fucking stupid.
I mean, you know, people have to find a use for it, and I'm glad it wasn't here. I'm glad they didn't.
Nobody has to find a use for it. If we could just stop saying that word forever, Electrum does not exist.
I like this version. All right, to get out of this fucking sponsor, you know, we did our time. The thing I was gonna say was, or another thing I was gonna bring up was, it's a little bit of like the. I remember trying, because our campaign that we did was very open world. It was just like, especially because I was building it as you guys were interacting with it. So like, as I was building it out, I was like, oh, let me shove a linear story in here, into the world that's happening, because like you guys were doing you guys were doing things. You guys were doing a lot of things.
Was this the night?
Yeah. So I threw this. I was just like, oh, I want to have a consequence to something you did, and let me throw in this linear story of like, here's a thing that these guys can do. I didn't think you guys would actually really interact with it, but there's a possibility I could maybe throw a story hook in here to get you go doing the thing. And of course, you guys are my players, you guys are my friends, and so you just completely ignored it. You just didn't care about the thing that I put there. And I was like, well, I'm a little sad, so I'm going to write my own book about what's happening to myself, about the stuff that's happening in this world. I wrote whole things about like, there's an event happening on this island. These different cities were dealing with it. We're sending people to go investigate. I had a whole timeline breakdown. Depending on how long you guys were doing things, it was affecting a clock in the world of like this thing that was happening. The best part for me is I was enjoying telling the story to myself so much, to a point, knowing how you guys would interact with it, that I was waiting for. We never got there, but I was waiting for the apocalypse to happen, because that's what was happening. And for you guys to just not care and just kind of wander about the world as like agents of chaos,
Yeah.
as the apocalypse is happening, and you guys are just also an apocalypse, like doing your own thing.
I think we would have just tried to be another version of the apocalypse, knowing that the apocalypse. We would have tried to raise the Dark Prince.
Dude, we could so beat that apocalypse with our own apocalypse.
Yeah.
Could be
Well,
such
no.
a better apocalypse. Than
Yeah, that. Not beat it. Just out apocalypse it.
Just show it up.
You know what? Oh, apocalypse, everything's going to burn, and then someone's going to have a battle to someone. Might as well be us. We're going to start destroying cities in the name of the Dark Prince.
It was one of those things where, like, it'd be like some event with the moon happens, and off in the distance you could see this like thing, and then it's like all town criers and all this news and all this stuff is happening, all this noise about the thing that's happening over there.
We would have
and
ignored
just
that
have
so
you guys
hard.
go, huh? I'm gonna go over there now.
We would have for sure ignored that so hard. That was my first campaign that I'd ever been in. So
Yeah.
like, I didn't understand the sense of responsibility a player has at all.
No,
Well, also
but-
that campaign just really didn't have it.
No. That campaign was its own like it was like taking the philosophies of like what is 5e and what is 5.5 now, which is like make everyone a superhero.
Yeah.
It was that turned up because it was 10 people, 12 people at the table, and like 9 of them, like 90% of the people playing had never played D&D before.
Yeah.
It was just like you. It was you and I think maybe one other guy had played.
My little brother had played before.
Yeah.
Ace.
Ace. Oh
Ace,
yeah.
Ace had played before.
Yeah, so probably like 3 or 4 other people at the table had played D&D before. But again, it was a massive table. It was my first big DMing. I think the first time I
That was your
DM'd.
first DM, yeah.
Yeah, it was the first time I DM'd, and it was like I didn't know that it's probably a good idea to not have a giant table. It was like,
We've made that mistake multiple times now.
Yeah, we're just at parties or we're hanging out with friends and we're like, oh, we're doing DD, and then my buddy, everyone's like, oh, or the people that are interested are like, oh, I want to play. I'm just like, yeah, come on in. Fucking join the table.
Me and Nix have had to have like private conversations where we're like, hey, we need to stop talking about D&D in front of us.
But yeah, and then it was just like that. I don't even remember where I was going with this, but anyways, but like that story was like this linear thing.
Sure.
Blew up into this.
Well, you turned it into a world setting instead of a storyline.
Yeah. And again,
Instead of an active storyline, I should say.
instead of and I wanted to, and I did interject.
World event. That's the phrase I've been looking for.
Yeah, and even like the first thing that you guys interacted with, because again, we're trying to make things tie into like a longer, broader story.
Yeah.
The first thing that you guys did that you fucked up that made it into a whole open world, not fucked up, but
It was the one good thing we
the
did.
consequences of your actions. The first thing you guys did was like, by the end of where we actually landed in the game, was actually a good thing. You guys were technically
Inadvertently doing a good thing.
helping the empire you were a part of
Yeah.
deal with somebody who was going to cause a crazy kind of rebellion. And like, yeah, you guys were technically doing it. But at the time, you guys just smashed open a cart of a client and like caused havoc and made me panic. But at the end of where you guys landed, it was, you guys were doing a good thing. But again, it was trying to interject like, I don't know if you'd call that linear, but like linear through lines, like threads. Because
it wasn't. Yeah, I mean, again, it sounds like you turned it more into a world setting. But say we did get attached to it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to know more about the story. But like, yeah, if we had to follow it, and we had to hit certain key points in the story in order to progress that story, that would be more, in my mind, linear.
Yeah. So the one night that you dealt with, the story for that is there were multiple nights.
Yeah.
So like there was essentially it was a King Arthur play. It was you had the king of a Fey king of the Round Table, and he was like the leader of controlled the mortal world, and then he had his round table. He had a table of knights that were like his generals. You interacted with one of them, and the way that the generals worked is based off their swords. Their swords were like artifacts, and so like those things would be what like the one knight that you interacted with. His goal was to go find where the swords were of his other knights to bring them back. If you brought them back to the king could resurrect the knight. So, and it was like that whole thing was just happening.
Yeah.
So like the story pieces you would hit is like what I said earlier in terms of like Mr. Rex's book, which is it would be taking out the generals. It's taking out the knights, dealing with their swords, and then it's dealing with.
But is there like a way that you would have to go about taking out the generals?
Oh God! At that point, I didn't really have that. Again, I was
Because
building,
that
I was
sounds
building
more-
that story piecemeal.
That sounds like more of my soft hooks of not really being totally linear.
I think-
there's like an ending.
I think generally, that's how I usually write. I think we vibe more on that like idea where I like having my characters and my players like here's a world and here's a thing like kind of like you like here's a world, but at the same time
Here's the thing you're
having
doing.
those linear soft hooks, those flaccid floppy hooks that just kind of dangle in front of them and kind of smack them in the face a little bit. I got nothing. From you guys. Try anyway. But like these soft hooks that just kind of pervade the world. So there's like a couple of different ways in which you can interact with these things. But
Yeah.
the characters don't have to. The players don't have to. Like you guys didn't want to go to the sewers.
Well, no, don't have to is more like gray.
Yeah.
Have to, but do it however you want. Like there are no story points between start and end. That's more like my thing.
Yeah.
And then what I'm calling linear in this conversation is when there are story beats that you have to hit along
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah, like there's an end goal, and then you have to hit certain things to get to the end goal.
Yeah, being the more linear
Yeah.
version of things. It sounds like yours was like, well, overall yours was more like what Gray does. But if you were to try to actually run that, it would be more like what I do, which is like, here's a start, here's a finish. Things are happening. Like there's world settings, world events, things that are happening. But however you want to go about it, however you find where that next sword is, or where one of those swords is, or once you find it, if you destroy it, or if you wield it, like however you get to the goal of killing the king is totally up to you.
Yeah.
That's more like my writing style, which is like, you're at the start, here's the end, you figure out how to do that. And there aren't beats on the way.
I think I push a little bit more towards the beats than you do, which is I think I if you were to my players were willing to go down that route,
Yeah.
then it would be okay. Then I would start building the beats as to how you get there. I'm not gonna, especially the way that I built that game and how I built that for you guys, which is having nothing else, nothing written outside of like a fog wall outside of the things that you guys had planned, like were roughly going to interact with. So like for me, it was like a little bit of like, if you were to go down this path,
Yeah.
then here's this beat that would then lead to this beat. And like, you don't have to do this. You could kind of go to this other beat first.
Yeah.
And maybe go back there, and it would be adjusting and kind of like they're not like hard set, you know?
So that sounds more in line with what I'm referring to as linear, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So you know what I was thinking about when you were bringing this up, or when you were explaining leaning more towards beats? I think another reason why, well, I guess they kind of cause each other. But anyways, I think one of the reasons why I don't need to do that, and then I intentionally write that reason in to not do it, is I don't write these big epic tales where you fight demigods and shit like that. Usually the goals are much smaller or less powerful, I should say, in my worlds. So the necessity to hit specific beats isn't there. You know what I mean? Like, there's some guy somewhere on the map. You got to find him and bring him home. But he's just some guy. You know what I mean? So, like, the need to hit certain beats isn't necessarily there because you don't need to. You're not fighting a demigod at the end of this. You know what I mean?
Oh, I mean, one of the stories that I probably will never run, but I thought about, like, in the early process of writing, like, D&D stories and what to do with it, one of them was going to be all of your characters would get plucked from their worlds.
Sure.
And then be put into a place where like time doesn't exist, and there's like almost like a time lord would be a good, or like
Sure.
the Marvels. What's Marvels? The Time Cops or whatever.
I don't know.
I forgot what they're called. Anyways, the
TVA.
Yeah, that. So
Time
like,
Police.
Yeah, the Time Police. It's kind of like a little bit like that, like how the Deadpool movie kind of played out.
That's also the TVA, so.
Yeah. So it would be your characters would be brought into this place where you would be. Oh my God, it's so close to that. Like thinking about like. Anyways, your characters would be brought to this
Did
place.
Marvel steal your story?
I have it in I have it in my docs. It is dated. It is fucking 10 years old probably. Anyways, but your characters will be brought there, explain that like, hey, throughout all these different like versions of yourselves, you guys are these, you guys are this powerful, whatever. We got to coalesce you into this timeline. We got to bring you here. And then from here, you have to then become the great warriors that you are now. And then you got to stop this thing from happening. Again, what you're talking about, some end of the world God thing that's going to kill everything. And so then the characters would be sent to this other world where they're nothing, where you're back to like level 1 characters. And then you train to become the characters that you start at level 20 at this place, start back at 1, and then live in this open world, your goal being to just get stronger because this thing is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I think I'm the opposite of you, where I have a tendency to write epic.
And want beats and
Want like a thing, a path that the characters are going, like the heroic tale, the story of the hero, the protagonist, and here's this big thing that's happening, and like how do my players respond to that? I think I prefer writing that way and less like
I like writing that way. I don't like playing that way.
Yeah.
As a player or a GM.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, as a player, actually, I think I would enjoy it just fine. But as a GM, I don't like GMing that way.
Mm-hmm.
I like writing that way, plenty. Yeah. But yeah, I there were no beats in the Tommy Reed campaign.
Yeah.
None at all. I wrote a world. I brought you there. Well, I wrote, America. 1887. No, it's America.
Oh, America. Oh, okay.
America.
There was no B in America?
Colorado. Nope.
No, just Merca.
Yeah, I know. Missed opportunity. And then I wrote the world. I wrote where the important players in the world are and what they're doing. And then I let you guys go and I put you guys kind of in the middle of the map. I was like, cool, you guys are hungry. And then, whatever you wanted to do, wherever you wanted to go, however you wanted to make enough money so that you can begin this blood feud again. And however you came about finding information, doing your investigation, ambushes, or full frontal assault, however you guys did it, Everything about where and what people were doing was kind of pre-written. Mm-hmm. And then it was just kind of up to you guys to figure it out. Figure out Colorado and the 103rd rival gang. Mm-hmm. And there were no beats written in. I think I wrote one beat at one point. I really, really wanted to The Walking Dead Negan you guys. I wanted to surround you guys with like 40 people or something and just be like, hey, stop following us, and then kill one of the players. Just in a situation where you couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I was gonna roll for what random player and then pull that character or that player aside like the day before. I'm gonna be like, hey, I'm gonna kill your character, and it's gonna be horrible, and it's gonna be a really big story beat. I want you to be a part of it and play into it as much as possible, and I want you to also have a backup character ready because, like, you're dying in a way that, like, how would you get around it?
Yeah.
And then I scrapped it, and I was like, you know what? I'm actually really enjoying not having any beats at all, and you guys figuring things out. I love the way you guys did it. It also, like, I don't know. I think it makes your players feel clever whenever something gets done because they genuinely accomplished it themselves.
Would you ever? Well, I mean, this is probably to Sav and to Gray. Would you ever see yourself like designing like a long form linear campaign?
Absolutely. Like I said, I enjoy writing it.
Yeah.
And I think I would enjoy playing it as well, just with responsible players, like at our home table.
Like I not necessarily like I'm not sure about the word responsible, but that players who would like that.
Well, what I mean by when I say responsible is that players that understand that they are here for this story. Mm-hmm. So that, like, they're never going to be like, I mean, I'll give an extreme example, but they're never going to be like, there's a clear hint in front of them, and we'll be like, I don't want to do that. I want to, I don't know. I want to learn how to make shoes and start a shoe selling business, and then.
Or players like how we, or at least I've played with players before, which is like, we go to a tavern and like, oh, there's a person at the bar you're supposed to talk to. It's like, oh, I'm going to set the roof on fire.
Yeah.
I was like, what's happening? What are you doing?
That's what I mean by not responsible. And not, there are games for that. There are games for that. And I think I would only want to run
something like that.
A linear story with, I'm using the word responsible, but people that are dedicated to the story as well. You brought up Critical Role earlier. They are dedicated to the story. Yeah. They are more than willing to, I mean, they still play within their characters very much. Sure. They still make their own decisions, and clearly, you can see it, their decisions do matter and they do change things. But they do have a sense of responsibility to the story. Yeah. Just like you do when you write a one-shot. When we were running Realm Watchers, we even talked about it where we're like, hey, everybody has a responsibility to the story because we're trying to do this in a single night.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I mean, Realm Launchers was designed
One-shots, yeah.
so specifically to be a one shot and to have specific kind of play.
Yeah. So okay, another thing is like we've talked about like session zeros before, although we're going to re-talk about that, I think.
Yeah.
Oh no, well maybe, we don't know. Anyways, we've talked about session zeros before and like the idea of the style of session zero where you sit around a table and make characters together and talk about the bonds of those characters and things like that. And I think all of that kind of builds and facilitates that responsibility as well. And then also doing things like I did with the Tommy Reed campaign, which was inserting things into everybody's background that do tie them to the story and things like that. All of that helps facilitate the players wanting to be a part specifically of this story that's happening. And I think that would make a really comfortable environment to run a linear campaign. And yeah, I would love to run a more linear campaign. I'm sure we're going to get shot all over in the comments about that. That's not linear, that's just D&D. Because that's how adventure modules exist, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And linear has a negative connotation. I absolutely do not mean it in a negative way anytime, anytime I've said it. But yeah, no, I would love to. I would love to write more epic tales that almost require beats in order to facilitate that level of power or doom or what have you. Yeah, I would love to participate in that. Absolutely. I think it really depends on the table.
Yeah.
It depends on what you mean long form. I have written one thing that I like to do with my current table is I have the freeform campaign. That's like, the major thing that we do. And if that ever ends for some reason, then and then I like to make changes to classes and stuff because everything I do is completely homebrewed.
Yeah.
500 pages of docs.
Yeah.
I would like to play that game with you guys someday, but
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Write a mini campaign. Let's start on Tuesday.
yeah. So what I do is I like to do intermission campaigns. So like when I'm fucking with stuff on the back end, races, classes, roles, rules, I'll do an intermission campaign which could last like it's meant to last like 4 sessions, but it could go up to like 12. And so that it'd be linear. Like the first one was you're working with a merchant and you're going on a set route around this set of countries, and then you stop and do stuff for that person. It's like, okay, we're here, go do this thing, come back, move on to the next place.
I'd put that under like mini campaign.
Yeah, I mean, in my general gist of how like you always, at least for the most part, talk about certain things. I never, or not that I never, but you seem to like have a high preference towards like that open storytelling. So it's that's cool that you have like you've had these things where it's like, oh yeah, it's a beat. You're literally on a railroad.
Oh, yeah, there's also
You're on a
Oh my
merchant path.
gosh, please change it to a railroad. Instead of on a cart merchant, it's a railroad merchant.
there's no trains in my place.
No.
I had another sort of long form linear campaign. That was my Eastern Legions one with the weird rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one sounded a lot more like there were beats.
Yeah, you're in a place. Go meet these people, and you meet the people. They tell you that there's bad guys here. Go kill them. And the big bad guy shows up. Go kill him.
Which is generally how beats go. Like it's like
Oh, and diplomacy.
it's like it's like they're wherever you start, and then it's like, oh, there are these people that you got to go talk to because they have information about something, and then you go and talk to them, and then there's a clue where something weird is happening in this city over here, and then you go to that city, and then you semi-resolve the problem in that city, and then you find information while doing that, or somehow learn about the fact that like, oh, this is happening in multiple locations. Well, now you got to go check out those other locations, and there's still freedom. Go to whichever one you want. Solve these problems however you want. But at each one, they kind of give you a hook to the next. You know what I mean? And that's generally what I mean with the more linear And that's what your Eastern Legions one sounded like.
Yeah.
Was
You start at point
That
A,
one,
and eventually you had to end at point Z. But the way you go through everything else is...
so that would not work with Nyx's table of Lord's Fall.
No, not at all.
It wouldn't work because you'd be like, oh, there's these people that you got to go talk to in this town over here. And then we would just go, no.
No, I want to go to this city and I want to start gueshing all of these people and I want to make.
Yeah.
You know, in actuality, that campaign was kind of linear because we went to places that we were directed to go to by other people in the game.
Yeah. Like I said, I there was a lot of like.
To a degree, we also rejected a lot of those places, though. Like that's what. So, like, I
I
mean,
mean, we were given a lot of options most of the time.
Yeah.
yeah.
And we just said, this sounds interesting. We'll go there.
But so. We were given an option to go to this place over here, and then we completely rejected it. Meaning, if anything in that direction needed to happen, we've just fucked it. But it didn't need to happen. So then we explore more. And yeah, I mean, you're always going to get those types of options. You're always going to get from the world in some way.
I mean,
Like always. Well, it has to be because if I as the GM don't describe anything at all to you, then where are you going to go? You don't even know what places exist in my world. So you're always going to get that information from an NPC. It's just a matter of like, being given a bunch of options and going and choosing one. To me, doesn't seem very linear, unless you have to do one of these options in order to
Yes.
continue.
Sure, but a lot of it was tied to the whole fact that we had this blood feud that we created for ourselves.
A lot of it didn't. We went to that whole Magic City, had nothing to do with that. We had that whole instance at was it Pyre's Point or something like that. That had nothing to do with it. We did something where there was the Tigress.
Yeah. So like
That had nothing to do. We did a bunch of stuff for that Thieves Guild that had nothing to do with it.
So good.
We just kind of kept reattaching ourselves to that blood feud because we were really into it.
I mean, it was also again me putting the options and some of the options threaded back to some of the stuff that you were doing. So yeah.
No, yeah, but I never remember us being
What
like, you know
threaded
what, I want to
back?
go to the red country. I'm tired of blue country.
No, we've joked about it.
We joked about that.
We've joked about it internally in terms of like, if you guys just decided to just do a thing that I had no planning for, I would boot you guys into
An encounter.
the fighting loading screen
Yeah.
because I just didn't have anything for the direction you guys.
And we did that all the time.
I'm pretty sure we've had some fights going back to the quest giver.
What do you mean?
I think some of that was so at a certain point I also built an encounter table. So I would just build.
Oh yeah, that's different.
When you guys would travel.
You way over encountered us.
Yeah, when you guys would travel, I'd be like, "Oh, how many days are you traveling?"
That's
Cool.
7 encounters.
So it'd be like, "I'm gonna roll the table if something happens." So there was when you would go do the quest, come back, and there would be an encounter. That wasn't a loading screen battle. There were I think I probably did a little bit of that in order to maybe mask a little bit of the battle loading screens to be like, "Oh yeah, you guys are on this road. You're going."
All it felt like was double.
Hey, here's a battle, and it's like, "Well, you're gonna ignore it." Well, a couple days down that road, there's another battle.
Yeah. So to Nyx's point, there were plenty of places that we went to that were offhandedly mentioned by an NPC. There was the whole Magic City that we went to that was like offhanded mentioned by an NPC, but the story wasn't over there. And we went anyways, and that was multiple sessions to get there, way too many random encounters, and multiple sessions to get back, way too many random encounters, and then and like
I'm sorry, did you say dragon turtle? Do you need a dragon turtle right now?
in fact, actually, about half of the campaign we abandoned that main story. It was only when we got back to the first town that we had ever been to that we decided to go back and kill one of the lords that had wronged us.
I thought the whole purpose was to get money and information and time.
There was no money in information at
There
Pirate's
was a time
Point or the
aspect.
magical.
I think I remember there was like a time thing that was something
Oh,
happened.
I think we were told that we could kill time, and instead of fast tracking, we just spent literal real world months doing other stuff.
Yes, I believe that is something that happened.
Yeah.
It's also like, I mean, this is sidetracking a little bit. Where like, I think one of the most fun things that happened out of that campaign was also the inspiration for Realm Watchers. Because there was a mission in this like time thing that you guys were doing. Where like, well, yeah, we're just going to be doing stuff. There was like a mission where you guys went to like a mind flayer's lair that was like that was like cleared out.
Yeah.
But there was still like a mind flayer there that you guys had to get a part for something.
We wanted walkie-talkies.
Walkie-talkies, yeah.
Yeah, so you needed a piece for something. And it was like, oh, this idea that there's this area that was cleared out by the Empire.
Yeah.
And that set off like the branching thing of when we decided we needed to do, or we wanted it to play more and have more consistency with just us three.
I think that was way later. I do remember,
But
I remember one of us referencing.
I think it was you referencing
Because
that.
most of Realm Watchers was born from me liking the episodic nature from the main arc of the Witcher show.
Oh, okay.
So there's a Witcher show, and there's like 3 different stories or something like that going on, and 2 of them were like continuous narrative stories, and then one of them, which was Geralt of Rivia, the main star of the show, felt very episodic, and I really enjoyed that. That was like the birth of the idea. But I do remember in the conversation about Realm Watchers, one of us mentioning, probably you, that the Mind Flayer session that we had done would fit really well into it, and it kind of helped us structure. I do recall that. That was a really cool mission.
Yeah.
Fuck, I was going to say something and I forgot what it was.
Sorry.
It was bringing it back to topic.
I cut you off on a whole thing.
It's all right. It was fun. I had a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
just went on a little side
Little side mission.
Side
It wasn't linear.
Non-linear podcast topics.
All right.
Yeah.
New topic. Linear or non-linear podcasts?
All
I
right.
prefer an open world to my podcast. I like to walk around not with my microphone. Yeah, that whole campaign felt very well. Also, talking about it being a little bit more open world, that campaign, I think that storyline did have beats, but also we made that storyline. Neither of those characters were meant to be bad guys. In fact, what were the 2 lords' names? Gimli and
Rainier.
Rainier. And which is the guy?
Gimli.
Gimli?
Yes.
Gimli was the one that we killed last, right?
Yes.
That was
Yes.
the end of the campaign.
Rainier was the first one you killed.
So pointing out the one good deed we did.
No. Get what?
Rainier was the first one we killed. We robbed him first in the first session in the
Yes,
one
yes,
shot.
Yes.
So the one good deed we did, which was trying to help out the... What was it? It was the cart had the niece or something of
Oh yeah, the
princess?
The one good deed that I could really remember you guys doing was you guys took on a quest to deal with like slavers. Like
No, not that. I'm talking about the cart where we burst open the cart and then we got all put to sleep.
yeah. Well, we got put to sleep.
Yes, when it was a one shot still. The beginning of
second
your
session.
campaign, the second session, Gimli hired us to
Yes.
transport someone who turned out to be
Yes, yeah,
like the
yeah.
princess or whatever. Gimli wasn't supposed to be a bad guy. He was literally
Yes.
hired to transport this person.
No, so Gimli hired the group that you guys were working for.
Yeah.
The like underground like
Yeah.
mission
Adventure Guild.
adventure
You
guild.
called it.
He hired that adventure guild just to hire bodyguards.
Yeah.
Just to safeguard this cart from going from one location to another location.
Yeah.
That's all you're supposed to do. It was supposed to be just encounters.
Yeah.
You guys were going to thing, and then an encounter would happen, then you guys deal with the encounter.
Yeah.
And that was it.
We refuse.
Yeah. Well, you didn't so much refuse as to be like, what's in this fucking cart?
Well, we were
this
super
dude's a little suspicious.
We were
man.
pretty suspicious.
Well, yeah, because also my character. Well,
Well, it was suspicious, but overall, whether that was actually a good thing or a bad thing, it was a neutral thing at that point to the story.
Yeah.
Gimli was essentially a quest giver who Nyx had to find a voice for and made a huge mistake. And therefore, vengeance. We did that. That wasn't like a pre-written thing. So that wasn't a beat. It's something that we latched onto, which is how, just like your campaigns, right? It's an open world. The world's doing what the world's doing. Your players want to go in and explore. They discover something. They really like it, so they latch onto it, and that becomes a tale. But that's still relatively open world. It's not like the adventure hook in the beginning of the campaign needed that to happen as a story beat. There was no adventure hook, and then it happened anyways. We made that a tale. So even us following that eventually. And then when we got to that final city, you can't tell me that felt linear.
No.
All of the crazy fucking terrorist shit that we were trying to do.
We were trying to put the DM on rails.
Yeah.
With our shenanigans.
Yeah. And,
Oh, man.
and absolutely,
And he didn't let us.
Absolutely, you cannot call that linear. Or the way we started back up. We left for like half a campaign. And then we came back. And then we had all discussed it privately away from Nyx. Away from table. And so we're like, oh yeah, we're going to travel to the north of town. Isn't that where Rainier lives? Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, just, we're going to walk on that road. Doesn't Rainier live on that road? Ah, okay, that's pretty neat. Say, what's his house look like when we walk by it? Just so that we had the timeline of being outside his house. Oh, yeah, as you're walking by and you see the gates and there's the manor and there's the guards outside. Oh, that's pretty neat. Anyways, we teleport inside. You can't tell us that was linear. Nyx didn't know it was happening.
Oh yeah, I had to stop the session.
You had to stop
that's
the
right.
session because one of the players was asking for too much detail.
Too much detail.
Yeah. Of a thing that you didn't even know was going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, though, I feel like once we declared that Gimli was our mortal nemesis,
I think Nick started writing things for it.
Yeah. No.
For sure.
it felt like we were going places because, like, hey, we want to find this guy. How do we find this guy? And then,
Yeah. There was definitely a lot of like.
That was so late into the campaign, though, is my only point.
Yeah, there was a lot of like the things you guys were
Yes.
doing was like the world was reacting to you guys, but also like I would be putting in threads to try to connect things and try to make things fit, and so it was a hodgepodge of like letting the players feel like it's all open world decisions, but like if you were to go down certain paths, that would be a linear story that I would tell going kind of in that direction, but it was also like trying to make trying to make fun happen and like still letting you guys gush innocent.
You made a huge mistake letting us have fun.
Yeah. God, some of the stuff you guys did.
Real quick, I have a question about that, or about the campaign. When you so I believe it was so early in the campaign. Yes, we were into killing the lords. That was the first quest we wanted to go on, and then Nyx, as the GM, you were like, I believe it was the old lady, from the Thieves Guild, was like, oh, I'll get information for you, but that's going to take a while, and then we as a group decided we were going to fuck off and do other things. Question. The reason it was going to take a while, is that because we had asked you on the spot for information and you were like, ooh, I kind of want to write some stuff, so let's have a session or two go by so that I have time to write stuff in regards to this quest you want to go on?
I think it's a mixture of that. Like there was a little bit of like,
And in world
like,
logic.
Like, oh, this is fun. Let me have time to explore it. Because I'd rather I'd rather build it so it's a little bit more intricate and built in. But also,
Your answer is immediately making me happy because I want to point out something about that campaign. But go ahead and finish.
but also the other aspect of it was just, in order to get that information in my mind, it would take time.
Yeah.
Like, it just in a real world setting, like this person who has no
you
interest.
guys did that in the Time of Read gang.
Yeah.
You guys asked Morris for information, and it took a couple weeks before you could get it.
This person has no interest in the thing that you're going after, and like, yeah, they have people that could get that information.
Yeah.
And she could collect it, but like maybe there's somebody she knows, but she has to talk to that person and she has to go like, so yeah, it's a little bit of like one, making it realistic, and two, like trying to build in some more complexity into it.
So, not as characters this time. Inadvertently, though, we did another nice thing, Gray. We did a nice thing inadvertently as players. Our GM needed time to write the quest that we wanted to go on because we sprung it on him, right? So, he was like, hey, I could tie this into game logic. Oh, I need a little bit of time. And instead of fast timing or doing a small thing around the city with a bunch of fast timing for the whatever week or month or whatever of game time it would take for the Thieves Guild to get the information, we decided to go on like a 6 to 8 months sidetrack thing in real world sidetrack, where we just decided to take the campaign south to Pyre's Point, and then all of the shit we did in Pyre's Point, the shit we did with the Tigress, the shit we did when we went to the Magic City, all of the glass blowing and shit that we did in the Magic City. Like our GM was like, oh, that's a really interesting thing. I need a little bit of time to really, I want to flesh that out a little bit. And we're like, oh, a little bit of time, you say? Yeah. Oh, so what are you thinking? A year? A year in real life? I feel like most campaigns would be like, cool, we'll go do a side quest and come back and then fast time, and that'll be a session or two. That should be enough time for our GM to write for us. Nope. We just took the campaign in a different direction for like a genuine year.
I think part of my mistake was I did build a world map. The world map was nothing. The world map was like, yeah, these are capitals and those are cities. I don't know anything about these cities, and I don't know how they're connected or any of that. But here,
I do that now.
Yeah, here's a world map. Here it is, and I gave it to you, and you guys. Well, I didn't give it to you guys. You guys immediately, like first or second session, were like, "Where's the map store? I want maps." And it's like,
I think that was me.
Yeah, I think it was you. It's like, all right, here's maps.
I didn't need a physical map. So again, just me being a new player, I wanted my character to have a map.
Yeah.
I wasn't like, Nix, draw me a map.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I even asked him, I was like, I'll pay more money for it to be really detailed.
Yeah.
I think I paid like 50 gold or something for the
Yeah,
map.
you made friends with the shopkeep.
Yeah, and I was like, I want to know everything about this. But I wanted that so that I could make rolls, or just if you would just let me have it to know things.
Yeah, of
that's
course.
all I wanted it for.
Yeah.
But then you got excited and made a map.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
But yeah, so I actually do that for the same reasons that fucking in your game led to 1,000 random encounters. Also, I'm doing this later in my life or my GMing experience, but I do that and I don't mind. I don't mind that this city has nothing going for it, because again, I could just improv whatever it is when they get there, and usually it'll be something interesting that I don't have well thought out, and then I'm even deeper into a corner, and then I have to think about why, and then it becomes more interesting. It's like I really don't mind having a world map and people going where they want to go.
Oh, I have a wet dream of mine of like, I probably won't ever do this, but it's a thought I had, and I have like the framework of what I would do, but I've wanted to go from mythological creation myth of a world, and from that point go through a timeline of all of the events of like 100,000 years of civilization, or maybe 100,000 years of like the world.
Yeah.
And then like a couple thousand years of civilization, like almost random roll events. So have like different civilizations pop up, random roll the consequences, write out the story of all that happens, and build out civilizations in this world. All these different events happening, have this huge tree of like an entire world with a long history and stuff happening, and then just put my players in it. Like,
Don't tell them any of it.
don't tell them any of it. You guys are in this town. Here's a world that I have 100%, like almost as much as I can, fully fleshed out.
Yeah.
And there's just like, there's no goal. Just, all right,
Have fun.
have fun.
I got so the way I've been doing it lately, because I always create new worlds whenever I run a campaign.
Yeah.
I have one of my worlds has so two of my worlds are like island continents, and so history begins with discovery of the island. One of them has 900 years of history. And it's basically, I'm going to go back through and randomize the numbers later, but it's basically every 50 years, world events from every 50-year increment. And there's about 900. The other world that I have is 3,000 years with world events around every 50 years. And then my other world is the last 100 years, though I don't have a document for it. I just have a general concept of what happened in 100 years. But I think the other two, I think you'd be interested maybe in reading those documents because, yeah, I wrote like a history.
Yeah.
For the now, it's not from like celestial birth of the world. It's from discovery. Both of those worlds start at 0 AD, which is like 0 years after discovery.
Okay.
And then like one of them's discovered by dwarves, and then pretty early on, within the first 50 years or whatever, they run into orc tribes, and it's disputed as to like who actually got there first because the dwarves have recorded history and the orcs have a verbal history. So the orcs don't know how long they've been there, so to speak. So it's kind of disputed who got there first. And then other ships coming in and, different races popping up out of nowhere. And where the fuck did that? Like in one of my worlds, like all of a sudden, it's like, I think 800 years into the world, all of a sudden just goblins just exist. And it's like, what the fuck? Where did these guys come from? But yeah, it's... I think you'd enjoy those documents because it's much shorter than you're talking about, and there's no random rolling.
Sure.
This is from a writer's aspect. I just wrote it. But yeah, I think you would enjoy that.
Yeah.
Every 50 years, world events, just a neat little thing. But yeah, I think that would be cool to do that, to write a really intricate world. Also, the idea of random outcomes is cool in the sense that it forces you to write something.
Yeah. It I can't like of course I could just write a thing.
Yeah.
I could just write.
Which is what I do.
Yeah, I could just write up
What's interesting, cool, I'll write that.
Exactly. But I want it to be like, I want to like D&D up the writing a little bit, like TTRPG up the writing. Like let it be random.
Non-linear world building.
Exactly, non-linear world building. Just have like
fucking hell.
Because it's historically what happens too is like sometimes you have armies that like unexpectedly beat the bigger army.
Yeah.
Or like, you have events that wouldn't necessarily make sense, but like, hey, like I wouldn't like, how do I play with that idea? How do I play with those concepts where like, yeah, I could just write that. And I could just arbitrarily put this group, this group, but also like, I don't know. It just to me, it was like,
I like that idea.
Yeah. This would be exciting to have this whole thing. And like, the other part is like, for the most part, my players will have no interaction, no knowledge, and I even would want it because I would want such a broad history. Where like, even parts of the world, if the players wanted to know the shit that I had written, nobody in that part of the world even knows it.
Yeah, I like doing that with I think I did that. Yeah, just in one of my worlds, like I said, the orcs keep a verbal history, not a written one. Yeah. So they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know all of this shit. Yeah. Because that's like, what, 10 generations ago? 15 generations? Why the fuck would they know that?
Like the civilization that was the record keepers, they were burned down. They were killed.
Yeah.
So there's a timeline in history where it's just all gone.
The only reason why I keep it short is so that I remember it. Because that would be the only downside to writing it like a whole fucking book is that, writing it like a book would be really cool if that is the project.
Yeah.
But writing a whole book for a D&D campaign you're gonna be like, fucking, I don't remember, and then you're gonna feel too guilty to look it up, and then you're just gonna make something up on the spot that has nothing to do with your history, anyways. So I try to keep it short.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I think that's our topic. That's linear versus.
That 100% we probably stuck to the prompt. That is.
Can you tell which version we like more? I don't think there was a very linear telling of this topic here.
I think
Who fucking cares?
I think we favor a particular direction.
It's a non-linear campaign. Non-linear podcast.
All right. Well, that's the podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. We are unfortunate ones. Once again, I'm Sav.
I'm Nix.
I'm Graythorn.
You can catch me and my campaigns over on startplaying.games. There will be a link to my profile in the description. And yeah, see you there.
Yeah, I'm Nix. I have a YouTube channel, and I'm gonna put more stuff on it. It's kind of been dead for a minute, but it'll get updated. You'll find me here. I have a YouTube channel. It'll be linked.
Graythorn, I do stream on Twitch when I play my table game online. Very rarely I'll turn the stream on when I'm not doing D&D, but I don't do that very often. You could find all my old recorded D&D games on YouTube at Highbara Graythorn.
Which will also be linked.
Which will also be linked, also linked to my Twitter. Or
Yeah,
Twitch.
all you guys' Discords, if you have Discords, will be linked too. Anything that any places you guys can find each other.
There will be links to stuff in the
Yeah, there'll be extra info.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
What? Oh, we got.
Gray,
we
you got
have to continue.
You
it.
got to say goodbye, Gray.
No, I don't. I don't have to at all. This is a non-linear sign off. I am an irresponsible podcaster. I will do it when I feel like it.
All right.